The millionaire freezes when he sees a black beggar just asking for food to clean her house. Richard Harding, they called him a titan of industry, a self-made man. But around these parts, folks just whispered that he was made of steel, cold, hard steel, lived alone in that massive estate on the outskirts of town. The kind of place that screamed, "I've got more money than you can imagine." But inside, empty. Haunted, some said. Then, this crisp autumn afternoon, while Richard was buried in quarterly reports that probably made most people's heads spin, a figure showed up at the gate. A woman, black, skin and bones, pushing a beat-up stroller. Richard almost dismissed her. Another one down on their luck, thanks to the plant closing. But something stopped him. The way she held on to that stroller, like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. She buzzed the intercom, her voice shaky, asking for work. Any kind of work, just enough to feed herself and her sick kid. And that's when Richard felt it, a chill crawling down his spine. Her voice, it was familiar, a ghost from a past he thought he'd locked away forever. Against his better judgment, he buzzed her in. Sarah Miller, that's what she called herself. Stood there, right in front of him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and desperation that could break your heart. He knew her from a lifetime ago. 20 years, maybe more. But that fiery, red hair? Those eyes that used to sparkle like crazy? Unforgettable. But it wasn't just Sarah that stopped him dead in his tracks. In that stroller, wrapped in a faded blanket, was a little girl. Red hair, just like Sarah. And eyes the exact same shade of Harding blue. His Harding blue. Sarah was saying something about needing work, desperate to take care of her daughter, Lily. A cough that just wouldn't quit. Richard stared at Lily, and the world tilted. The timing was. The resemblance? It couldn't be. Could it? But deep down, he knew. Lily was his daughter. He'd left Sarah, left her behind in this forgotten town, chasing dollar signs and a life that was 1,000,000 miles away from here. And now, here she was, a living reminder of what he'd done. Before he could even open his mouth, Caldwell showed up, his partner, the shark, grinning like he'd just swallowed a goldfish. He started rattling off details of some deal that was going to make Richard even richer. As if he needed it. Richard was trapped between the life he'd built and the family staring him right in the face. Caldwell, ever the opportunist, steered Richard back to business, a subtle threat hanging in the air. Caldwell left. Richard turned back to Sarah. "Sarah," he started, his voice barely a whisper, "we need to talk." But then Lily coughed. A terrible, rattling cough that shook her whole body. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Harding," she pleaded, "please, can you help me get her to a doctor? I don't know what else to do." Richard looked at Lily, his own flesh and blood, and made a choice. "Of course, Sarah. Anything." He reached for his phone, but the feeling in his gut was like ice. His carefully constructed world was about to crumble. Was this a second chance? Or a trap from the past? And what would Caldwell say when he found out about Richard's secret family? Sirens wailed in the distance, a reminder that life ain't always fair. And Richard's golden cage had just become a prison. Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer um alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você está aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. Richard looked at Lily, his own flesh and blood, and made a choice. Of course, Sarah. Anything. He reached for his phone, but the feeling in his gut was like ice. His carefully constructed world was about to crumble. Was this a second chance? Or a trap from the past? And what would Caldwell say when he found out about Richard's secret family? Sirens wailed in the distance. A reminder that life ain't always fair, and Richard's golden cage had just become a prison. He dialed 911, his hands shaking so bad he almost dropped the phone. Yes, I need an ambulance at Harding Estate. A child, severe respiratory distress. Hurry! Sarah just kept crying, clutching Lily tighter. Her face etched with years of worry, years he'd missed. The ambulance roared up the driveway, lights flashing, paramedics jumping out. They rushed to Lily, hooking her up to oxygen, their faces grim. Richard watched, feeling useless, like a spectator in his own life. "We need to get her to the hospital, stat!" one of the paramedics said, his voice clipped and professional. "Her breathing is shallow, possible pneumonia." They loaded Lily into the ambulance, Sarah climbing in beside her. Richard hesitated, then jumped in too. He couldn't leave them. Not now. Maybe not ever. The drive was a blur of flashing lights and Sarah's quiet sobs. Richard tried to hold her hand, but she flinched away. He deserved it. At the hospital, chaos. Doctors, nurses, machines beeping. Lily was whisked away, leaving Richard and Sarah alone in the waiting room. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Why, Richard? Why did you leave?" He opened his mouth to answer, to offer some lame excuse about ambition and being young and stupid. But the words wouldn't come. He had no good reason, just selfishness. Suddenly a doctor appeared, his face grim. "Mr. Harding?" he asked. Richard nodded. "We need to talk." They led him to a small, sterile room. The doctor sat down, his expression serious. "Your daughter, she's very sick. We're doing everything we can, but..." He paused, taking a deep breath. "She has a rare genetic condition, a severe immune deficiency. Without a bone marrow transplant, her chances aren't good." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. "A transplant? But what about Sarah? Can't she..." The doctor shook his head. "No, we've already tested her. She's not a match." Richard stared at him, numb. "Then, what do we do?" "We need to find a matching donor," the doctor said. "And quickly. The best chance would be a sibling, but given the circumstances..." He trailed off, leaving the unspoken question hanging in the air. Richard had no other children, or so he thought. He looked up, meeting the doctor's gaze. There's someone I need to call." He fumbled for his phone again, dialing a number he hadn't called in years. A number that belonged to a woman he'd tried to forget. A woman who held the key to everything. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a voice, cold as ice, answered. "Yes?" "Mom?" Richard croaked, his voice trembling. It's Richard." A long, drawn-out silence. Then, "What do you want, Richard? After all these years?" "Mom," he said, desperate, "I need your help. It's about my daughter, Lily. She's sick, really sick, and she needs a bone marrow transplant. I need to know. I need to know if I have a brother, a half-brother I never knew about." The silence that followed was deafening. Then a chilling laugh. "Oh, Richard," his mother said, her voice dripping with venom. "You always were a fool. You think you can just waltz back into my life after all this time and ask for a favor? After what you did? Mom, please, this is about Lily. She's dying." "And whose fault is that, Richard? You made your bed. Now lie in it." She was about to hang up when Richard blurted out the words he'd been dreading to say, the words that would shatter everything. "Mom, please, I know about Caldwell. I know he's my brother. Please, just tell me if he can help Lily." The line went dead. Richard stared at the phone, his hand shaking uncontrollably. He knew. He knew about Caldwell. How? He'd never told a soul. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Caldwell, his face a mask of fury. "You knew?" he hissed, his voice barely audible. "You knew all along?" He lunged at Richard, grabbing him by the throat. "You were never supposed to find out. Never!" Everything went black. Everything went black. Then, coughing, someone was shaking him. Caldwell's face swam into view, twisted with something that wasn't just anger. It was fear. "Get up, you idiot!" Caldwell hissed, pulling him to his feet. "She's here. Our mother is here." Richard blinked, trying to clear his head. His mother? Here? But why? He stumbled out of the shadows, and there she was, standing in the hospital hallway, looking like a queen who'd just lost her crown. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "Mom?" Richard croaked, his throat still raw. She ignored him, focusing on Caldwell. "Is it true?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Is it true about the girl?" Caldwell nodded, his face grim. "She needs a transplant. I might be a match." A wave of nausea washed over Richard. All this time, Caldwell had been walking around with the power to save his daughter's life, and he'd been ready to let her die? But then his mother spoke, and the world tilted again. "He's not a match," she said, her voice flat. "He can't be. He's not your brother, Richard." Richard stared at her, confusion swirling in his head. "What? But you said—" "I lied," she snapped. "I lied to hurt you, to make you suffer like you made me suffer." Caldwell looked from Richard to their mother, his face a mask of disbelief. "What are you saying? Who am I then?" His mother's voice dropped to a whisper. A secret finally unearthed after all these years. "You're not Richard's brother, David. You're his son." The air crackled with the unspoken. Richard felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Caldwell? David? His son? It couldn't be. It was impossible. But the look on his mother's face, the raw pain in her eyes, it was all too real. Suddenly, a scream pierced the air. A nurse came running, her face pale with panic. "Doctor, we need you. It's Lily. She's crashing." Richard pushed past his mother, past David, and ran towards the chaos. He burst into Lily's room to find doctors swarming around her bed, their faces grim. Sarah stood in the corner, sobbing silently. One of the doctors looked up. His eyes filled with despair. "We're losing her," he said, his voice barely audible. "There's nothing more we can do." Richard felt his world shatter. He stumbled towards Lily, reaching out to touch her hand. It was cold. So cold. Then, a voice, clear and strong, cut through the chaos. "Wait!" Everyone turned to see David standing in the doorway, his face pale but determined. "Test me," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound conviction. "Test me now. I don't care what she says. I'm her only hope." The doctors exchanged glances, then nodded. They rushed to David, drawing blood, their movements urgent. Richard watched, his heart pounding in his chest. Could this be it? Could this be the miracle they needed? As the doctors worked, Richard looked at David, really looked at him for the first time. He saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something that wasn't just fear or anger. It was love, a father's love for his daughter. But then, just as the doctors finished drawing blood, the lights flickered. And then they went out. The hospital plunged into darkness. A collective gasp filled the air, and in the darkness, a single gunshot rang out. Everything went black, and in the darkness, a single gunshot rang out. Screams. Then a scramble. Someone yelling, "Medic! We need a medic!" The smell of ozone. Then the emergency lights flickered on, painting the room in a sickly yellow glow. Richard blinked, his ears ringing. Sarah was on the floor, a dark stain blooming on her chest. Lily was still in the bed, her small body convulsing. David stood frozen, a gun clutched in his hand, his face a mask of horror. I didn't," he stammered, dropping the weapon with a clatter. Richard crawled to Sarah, his hands shaking. Sarah, stay with me!" Her eyes fluttered open, a faint smile greasing her lips. "Richard," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "take care of Lily." And then she was gone. Richard howled, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the sterile room. His life, everything he thought he knew, shattered. But there was no time to grieve. Lily was still dying. He lurched to his feet, grabbing David by the collar. "You did this! You killed her!" David's eyes were wide with shock, tears streaming down his face. "I swear, I didn't mean to! It was an accident! The gun, it just went off!" Richard didn't care. All he saw was the man who had destroyed everything. He raised his fist, ready to strike, when Lily coughed, a wet, rattling sound that stopped him cold. He looked down at her, her small body struggling for breath. Sarah was gone. He couldn't lose Lily too. Ignoring David, ignoring the chaos around him, Richard scooped Lily up in his arms. "We need to get her out of here," he said, his voice trembling. "Now." He ran, pushing past the doctors and nurses, ignoring their protests. He had to get Lily to safety. He had to save her. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets. The city was a blur of flashing lights and blurred sounds. He had no idea where he was going, but he had to get Lily away from this place, away from the darkness that had consumed them. As he staggered down the street, a black car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, and a familiar voice said, "Get in, Richard. I can help." It was his mother, but her face. It wasn't the cold, calculating face he knew. There was something different about her, something desperate. "Get in, Richard, now, Before it's too late. He hesitated, but then he looked down at Lily, her face pale and lifeless in his arms. He had no choice. He climbed into the car, and his mother slammed her foot on the gas, tearing away from the hospital, leaving behind a scene of death and destruction. As they sped through the rain-slicked streets, Richard looked at his mother, his heart pounding in his chest. What was she up to? What was really going on? Then she turned to him, her eyes filled with a pain he had never seen before. "Richard," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "there's something you need to know about Lily, about who her real father is." As they sped through the rain-slicked streets, Richard looked at his mother, his heart pounding in his chest. What was she up to? What was really going on? Then she turned to him, her eyes filled with a pain he had never seen before. "Richard," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "there's something you need to know about Lily, about who her real father is." He braced himself. Another bomb dropping. What could possibly be worse than what he'd already been through? "It wasn't you, Richard. You aren't Lily's biological father." He stared at her, stunned. "What? But, Sarah, the eyes. Everyone said—" His mother shook her head. Sarah was desperate. She needed someone to believe Lily was yours, someone to care. The eyes? It was a lie. Colored contacts. She made it all up. Richard's mind spun. None of it made sense. Who then? Who was Lily's father? His mother took a deep breath, her face etched with anguish. "It was me, Richard." He recoiled, slamming back against the seat. "You? What are you saying? You and Sarah?" Tears streamed down her face. "It was a long time ago, Richard. Before your father. Before everything. Sarah and I, we were young. We made a mistake. A beautiful, terrible mistake." The rain hammered against the windshield, mirroring the storm raging inside him. His mother? With Sarah? Lily? His half-sister and daughter? The world had officially gone insane. But why? Why keep this a secret all these years? Why tell me now? "Because Lily needs help, Richard, and I can't give it to her. I'm old, I'm sick, and I did terrible things to you, to everyone. This is the only way I can try to make things right." Suddenly, Lily coughed, a weak, desperate sound. Richard looked down at her face pale and clammy. He didn't care who her father was. He loved her. He had to save her. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "To someone who can help her," his mother said, her eyes fixed on the road. "Someone who owes me a debt." She drove faster, the car swerving through the rain-slick streets, heading out of the city, into the darkness. Richard had no idea where they were going, or who they were going to see. But he knew one thing: his life would never be the same. Just as they reached the outskirts of town, the car lurched violently. A tire blew. His mother fought for control, but it was no use. The car spun out, careening off the road and crashing into a tree. Everything went black. This time, when Richard woke up, he was alone. The car was a mangled wreck, the rain still pouring down. His mother was gone, and Lily was nowhere to be seen. He crawled out of the wreckage, his body aching, his head spinning. Where were they? Where was Lily? And what had happened to his mother? He stumbled down the road, calling out their names, his voice lost in the storm. Then he saw it, a faint light in the distance, a house. He staggered towards it, praying for help, for answers. As he got closer, he recognized the house. It was old, dilapidated, but he knew it. He'd been here before. It was Sarah's house. He pushed open the door, and the scene inside made his blood run cold. The house was empty, stripped bare, but in the center of the room, on the floor, was a single object, a faded photograph. He picked it up, his hands trembling. It was a picture of Sarah and his mother, young and smiling, and standing between them, holding their hands, was a little girl, Lily. But it wasn't Lily. It was a different little girl. A girl with bright red hair and Caldwell's eyes. And scrawled across the back of the photo, in Sarah's handwriting, was a single, chilling sentence. The truth always comes out, Richard, even if it destroys you. He stared at the photo. Lily, connected to Caldwell? The eyes? Sarah's secret? His mom and Sarah? It was too much. Suddenly, a noise. A floorboard, creaking upstairs. He grabbed a rusty poker from beside the fireplace, his heart hammering. Someone was in the house. But who? And what did they want? He crept up the stairs, each step agonizingly slow. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. At the top, he paused, listening. Nothing. He pushed open the first door. Empty room. Cobwebs everywhere. The next door, same thing. Then the last door. He hesitated. This was it. He took a deep breath and kicked it open. The room was dark, but he could see a figure standing by the window. A woman. "Mom," he whispered. The figure turned. It wasn't his mother. It was Lily. But it wasn't the Lily he knew. This Lily was older, stronger, and she was holding a gun. "Hello, Dad," she said, her voice cold as ice. He stared at her, his mind reeling. "Lily? What's going on?" She smiled, a chilling, twisted smile. "You really thought Sarah and Grandma were the only ones playing games? You were wrong, Daddy. So wrong." She raised the gun, pointing it at him. "Time to wake up, Richard. The show's over." He couldn't move, couldn't speak. All he could do was stare into her eyes, Caldwell's eyes. And in that moment, he understood. Lily wasn't sick. She wasn't innocent. She was the mastermind, the puppet master pulling all the strings. She'd used Sarah. She'd used possibly want? "Why, Lily? Why are you doing this?" She laughed, a high, shrill sound that echoed through the room. "Because, Daddy, you have something I want, something you've been hiding for years." He frowned. What was she talking about? He didn't have anything. He'd lost everything. Then he remembered. The offshore accounts, the hidden millions, the money he thought he'd kept secret from everyone. She knew. Somehow she knew. "The money, Richard, the money is mine." Before he could react, she fired. The bullet ripped through the air, hitting him square in the chest. He gasped, stumbling backwards. He looked down at the blood spreading across his shirt, his vision blurring. This was it. This was how it ended. But then, something happened. The door behind him burst open, and a figure rushed into the room. It was David, Caldwell. He lunged at Lily, tackling her to the ground. The gun went flying. They wrestled, a tangled mess of limbs and fury. Richard watched, helpless, as they fought. Suddenly, David gained the upper hand. He grabbed the gun and pointed it at Lily's head. "This ends now," he growled, his voice filled with rage. But Lily just smiled. "Go ahead, David," she said, her voice mocking. "You don't have the guts." David hesitated. His hand trembled, and then he pulled the trigger. But he didn't shoot Lily. He shot himself. He shot himself. Silence, then a choked sob. It was coming from Lily. She was kneeling on the floor, cradling David's head in her lap, tears streaming down her face. "David! David, no!" Richard stared at them, his mind blank. "David? Dead? But why? He just saved him." Suddenly, Lily looked up, her eyes filled with a raw, agonizing pain. A pain that Richard recognized. It was the pain of losing someone you loved. "You don't understand," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "He was doing it for me. For us." Richard frowned. For them? What was she talking about? Then, the truth hit him like a freight train. Lily wasn't Caldwell's pawn. She wasn't his victim. She was his lover. He staggered back, his hand flying to his chest. The bullet wound throbbed, but the pain was nothing compared to the agony ripping through his soul. Lily. And David? It was impossible, disgusting, but it explained everything. Why she'd been so desperate for the money, why David had been so willing to protect her. It was all about them. But how? When? He couldn't process it. Suddenly, Lily stood up, her face a mask of cold fury. "You ruined everything!" she screamed, pointing the gun at Richard. "You destroyed our lives!" He didn't flinch. He was past caring. Let her shoot him. Let it all end. But then a voice, calm and steady, cut through the chaos. "Put the gun down, Lily." It was his mother. She was standing in the doorway, a small silver pistol clutched in her hand. Her face was pale, but her eyes were hard, determined. Lily stared at her expression shifting from rage to confusion. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" His mother took a step forward, her gaze locked on Lily. "I'm here to stop you, Lily, to end this madness." Lily laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "You can't stop me, Grandma. I'm too close. I'm going to get what I deserve." "No, you're not," his mother said, her voice unwavering. "Because I know the truth, Lily. I know who you really are." Lily froze, her eyes widening in horror. "What are you talking about?" His mother took another step forward, her gun raised. "I know that you're not Sarah's daughter, Lily. You're not related to any of us." Richard stared at his mother, stunned. What was she saying? "You're a fake." "Lily," his mother continued, her voice rising, "you were adopted. Sarah found you in a dumpster, abandoned and alone. She raised you, loved you, but you never loved her back." Lily screamed, a high-pitched, animalistic sound. "Liar! You're lying!" "No, Lily," his mother said, her voice filled with pity. "I'm telling the truth. Sarah told me everything, years ago. She was afraid of you. She knew you were dangerous." Lily lunged at his mother, her hands outstretched. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you all!" But before she could reach her, his mother fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the house. Lily crumpled to the floor, a look of disbelief on her face. And then, everything went black. Richard woke up in a hospital bed. His chest was bandaged, his body aching. A doctor stood beside him, his expression grim. "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Harding. The bullet missed your heart by millimeters." Richard nodded, his mind still reeling. "What happened to everyone?" the doctor sighed. "Your mother is in custody. She's being charged with attempted murder and several other crimes. Lily is dead. She died at the scene." Richard closed his eyes, a wave of grief washing over him. So many lives lost, so much pain. "And David?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The doctor shook his head. He didn't make it. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. Richard turned his head away, tears streaming down his face. It was over. All over. But then, the doctor said something that made his blood run cold. "There's one more thing, Mr. Harding, about your mother. Before she was taken into custody, she kept repeating one name, a name that might be of interest to you." Richard held his breath, waiting. She kept saying, "the gardener." The gardener? What did that mean? Who was the gardener? And why did the sound of that name send a shiver down his spine? The gardener? O que isso queria dizer? Quem era esse tal jardineiro? Senti arrepio na espinha. Aquele nome, alguma coisa ali não cheirava bem. O médico me olhava com uma expressão estranha, como se soubesse de algo que eu não sabia. Ele era um amigo da sua mãe, Sr. Harding. Um amigo. Muito próximo. Um amigo? Minha mãe não tinha amigos, só inimigos. Ele era responsável pela manutenção do jardim da propriedade da sua família. Um homem quieto e reservado. De alguma forma, ele era próximo da sua mãe. O nome dele era Thomas, um velho que cuidava do jardim da casa dos meus pais há anos. Lembro dele, sempre calado, meio sombrio. Mas daí a ser próximo da minha mãe? Ele morreu há muitos anos, Sr. Harding. Mas antes de falecer, ele confidenciou algo à sua mãe, disse o médico. Ele disse que tinha um filho que nunca conheceu. Um filho? O jardineiro? O que isso tinha a ver comigo? O médico respirou fundo. Esse filho, Sr. Harding, é você. O mundo girou, eu, filho, do jardineiro. Não podia ser. Meu pai era Richard Harding, o magnata, o homem de aço. Não, não pode ser, eu disse, a voz embargada. Minha mãe, ela nunca. Sua mãe era uma mulher de muitos segredos, Sr. Harding. E parece que ela levou alguns desses segredos para o túmulo. Mas este ela fez questão de revelar antes de ser presa. Eu estava em choque, absolutamente em choque. Tudo o que eu achava que sabia sobre a minha vida, sobre a minha família, era mentira. Meu pai não era meu pai. Minha mãe tinha tido um caso com um jardineiro. E Lily era minha meia-irmã. Mas o que isso significa? Eu perguntei, a voz um sussurro. Quem sou eu, então? O médico balançou a cabeça. Isso, Sr. Harding, é algo que você terá que descobrir sozinho. Ele me deixou sozinho no quarto. Sozinho com a minha dor, com a minha confusão, com a minha nova e horrível realidade. Eu não era Richard Harding. Eu era Thomas. Ou melhor, eu era filho de Thomas, o jardineiro. De repente, uma porta se abriu, e quem entrou no quarto me deixou ainda mais em choque. Era Caldwell. Ou melhor, David. Ele me olhou com uma expressão vazia, sem emoção alguma. Eu sei, ele disse, a voz fria. Eu sempre soube. Eu não consegui dizer nada. Só consegui encarar ele. Nossa mãe me contou, ele continuou. Ela me contou que eu era seu irmão. Ela me contou sobre o jardineiro. Mas por quê? Eu perguntei. I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request. Eu fechei os olhos, esperando o tiro. Mas o tiro não veio. Em vez disso, eu ouvi um clique. E então, uma voz. Não faça isso, David. Eu abri os olhos. Era minha mãe. Ela estava parada na porta, algemada, mas com uma expressão de determinação no rosto. Não vale a pena, filho. Ela disse. Não se suje a esse nível. David hesitou. Ele olhou para minha mãe, depois para mim. E então ele abaixou a arma. Eu não posso, ele disse, a voz embargada. Eu não consigo. Minha mãe sorriu, um sorriso triste, mas um sorriso. Eu sei, ela disse. Eu sempre soube que você era melhor que isso. David jogou a arma no chão e começou a chorar. Minha mãe se aproximou dele e o abraçou. E naquele momento eu percebi. Apesar de tudo o que tinha acontecido, apesar de todas as mentiras, apesar de toda a dor, nós ainda éramos uma família. De um jeito estranho, disfuncional, mas uma família. Mas a pergunta ainda pairava no ar. Se David sabia a verdade, por que ele se matou? Minha mãe olhou para mim, como se lesse meus pensamentos. Ele se matou para proteger você, Richard. Para proteger nós dois. Proteger? De quem? E então eu me lembrei das palavras do médico. The Gardener. Aquele nome ainda me assombrava. De repente, um flash de memória. Uma imagem do jardineiro, Thomas, sorrindo para mim quando eu era criança. Um sorriso gentil, mas também um sorriso sinistro. E então eu entendi. The Gardener não era só o jardineiro. Era algo mais. Algo muito mais. E eu tinha a sensação de que ele ainda estava por perto, observando, esperando. E que a nossa história ainda não tinha terminado. The Gardener? O quê? Isso queria dizer? Quem era esse tal jardineiro? Senti um arrepio na espinha. Aquele nome, alguma coisa ali não cheirava bem. O médico me olhava com uma expressão estranha, como se soubesse de algo que eu não sabia. Ele era um amigo da sua mãe, Mr. Harding. Um amigo muito próximo. Um amigo? Minha mãe não tinha amigos, só inimigos. Ele era responsável pela manutenção do jardim, da propriedade da sua família. Um homem quieto e reservado. De alguma forma, ele era próximo da sua mãe. O nome dele era Thomas, um velho que cuidava do jardim da casa dos meus pais há anos. Lembro dele, sempre calado, meio sombrio. Mas daí a ser próximo da minha mãe, ele morreu há muitos anos, Mr. Harding. Mas, antes de falecer, ele confidenciou algo à sua mãe, disse o médico. Ele disse que tinha um filho que nunca conheceu. Um filho? O jardineiro? O que isso tinha a ver comigo? O médico respirou fundo. Esse filho, Mr. Harding, é você. O mundo girou. Eu? Filho do jardineiro? Não podia ser. Meu pai era Richard Harding, o magnata, o homem de aço. Não, não pode ser, eu disse, a voz embargada. Minha mãe? Ela nunca. Sua mãe era uma mulher de muitos segredos, Mr. Harding. E parece que ela levou alguns desses segredos para o túmulo. Mas este, ela fez questão de revelar antes de ser presa. Eu estava em choque, absolutamente em choque. Tudo o que eu achava que sabia sobre a minha vida, sobre a minha família, era mentira. Meu pai não era meu pai. Minha mãe tinha tido um caso com o jardineiro. E Lily. Lily era minha meia-irmã. Mas o que isso significa? Eu perguntei, a voz um sussurro. Quem sou eu então? O médico balançou a cabeça. Isso, Mr. Harding, é algo que você terá que descobrir sozinho. Ele me deixou sozinho no quarto. Sozinho com a minha dor, com a minha confusão, com a minha nova e horrível realidade. Eu não era Richard Harding. Eu era Thomas. Ou melhor, eu era filho de Thomas, o jardineiro. De repente uma porta se abriu, e quem entrou no quarto me deixou ainda mais em choque. Era Caldwell. Ou melhor, David. Ele me olhou com uma expressão vazia, sem emoção alguma. Eu sei, ele disse, a voz fria. Eu sempre soube. Eu não consegui dizer nada. Só consegui encarar ele. Nossa mãe me contou. Ele continuou. Ela me contou que eu era seu irmão. Ela me contou sobre o jardineiro. Mas por quê? Eu perguntei. Por que ela escondeu isso de mim? Ele deu de ombros. Ela disse que era para me proteger. Ela disse que você era perigoso. Perigoso? Eu gritei. Eu não fiz nada. Existiu, ele respondeu. E isso era o suficiente para me colocar em perigo. Ele tirou uma arma do bolso. A mesma arma que ele usou para se matar. A mesma arma que matou Sarah. Eu deveria ter feito isso antes, ele disse apontando. Arma para mim. Eu deveria ter te matado há muito tempo. Eu fechei os olhos, esperando o tiro. Mas o tiro não veio. Em vez disso, eu ouvi um clique. E então, uma voz. Não faça isso, David. Eu abri os olhos. Era minha mãe. Ela estava parada na porta, algemada, mas com a expressão de determinação no rosto. Não vale a pena, filho, ela disse. Não se suje a esse nível. David hesitou. Ele olhou para minha mãe, depois para mim. E então ele abaixou a arma. Eu não posso, ele disse, a voz embargada. Eu não consigo. Minha mãe sorriu. Um sorriso triste, mas um sorriso. Eu sei, ela disse. Eu sempre soube que você era melhor que isso. David jogou a arma no chão e começou a chorar. Minha mãe se aproximou dele e o abraçou. E naquele momento, eu percebi. Apesar de tudo o que tinha acontecido, apesar de todas as mentiras, apesar de toda a dor, nós ainda éramos uma família. De um jeito estranho, disfuncional, mas uma família. Mas a pergunta ainda pairava no ar. Se David sabia a verdade, por que ele se matou? Minha mãe olhou para mim, como se lesse meus pensamentos. Ele se matou para proteger você, Richard. Para proteger nós dois. Proteger? De quem? E então eu me lembrei das palavras do médico. The Gardener. Aquele nome ainda me assombrava. De repente, um flash de memória. Uma imagem do jardineiro, Thomas, sorrindo para mim quando eu era criança. Um sorriso gentil, mas também um sorriso sinistro. E então eu entendi. The Gardener não era só o jardineiro. Era algo mais, algo muito mais. E eu tinha a sensação de que ele ainda estava por perto, observando, esperando, e que a nossa história ainda não tinha terminado. Minha mãe me olhou, um olhar cansado, mas ainda firme. Precisamos sair daqui, Richard. Agora. Eu não entendi. Sair? Para onde? E o que aconteceu com o David? Precisamos... David fez o que tinha que fazer. Ela interrompeu. A voz embargada. Agora a prioridade é você, The Gardener. Ele não vai parar. Ele nunca parou. Ela sabia. Ela sempre soube. Mas o que exatamente ela sabia? Um policial entrou no quarto. Senhora Harding, precisamos ir. O Sr. Harding ficará sob nossa custódia para interrogatório. Minha mãe me olhou uma última vez, um olhar de súplica. Richard, escute, vá para a casa antiga, a cabana no lago. Lá você encontrará respostas. E tome cuidado. Não confie em ninguém. Ninguém. E com isso, ela foi levada, algemada, para fora do quarto, me deixando sozinho, mais uma vez, com um turbilhão de perguntas e um medo crescente. A casa antiga, a cabana no lago. O que estaria lá? Respostas, ela disse. Mas que tipo de respostas? E por que ela estava tão apavorada? Eu precisava sair dali. Precisava descobrir a verdade. Esperei o policial sair do meu quarto para ir ao banheiro, fingindo estar enjoado. Ele me deixou sozinho, sem imaginar o que eu estava planejando. Abri a janela do banheiro, pulei e corri para longe dali sem olhar para trás. A cidade estava escura, chovendo. Peguei um carro emprestado e dirigi o mais rápido que pude até a cabana. Cheguei lá de madrugada. O lugar estava abandonado, poeirento, mas estranhamente familiar. Entrei, tateando no escuro, até encontrar o interruptor. A luz fraca revelou um cômodo pequeno, com móveis velhos e uma lareira apagada. Vasculhei o lugar, procurando por algo que me desse alguma pista. Encontrei um baú velho trancado. Forcei a fechadura e abri. Dentro havia fotos antigas, cartas e um diário. Peguei o diário e comecei a ler. Era da minha mãe. As primeiras páginas eram sobre a minha infância, sobre o meu pai. Mas depois, as coisas começaram a mudar. Ela começou a escrever sobre Thomas, o jardineiro, sobre como ele era diferente, especial, sobre como ela se sentia atraída por ele. E então, a confissão. Ela e Thomas tinham tido um caso. E eu era fruto desse caso. Mas não era só isso. Thomas não era apenas um jardineiro. Ele era algo mais, algo sinistro. Ele era obcecado por ela, possessivo, controlador. Ele a manipulava, a ameaçava. E ele tinha planos. Planos para mim. Ele queria me transformar em algo especial, em algo maligno. Minha mãe estava apavorada. Ela sabia que Thomas era perigoso. Ela sabia que ele era capaz de qualquer coisa. E então um nome que aparecia repetidamente nas páginas do diário. O projeto. O que era o projeto? O que Thomas estava planejando? Continuei lendo, desesperado por respostas. E então encontrei. Uma página, rabiscada com uma letra trêmula, descrevia o projeto em detalhes horríveis. Thomas acreditava em uma linhagem, manipulação genética. E eu era a chave para tudo. Ele queria usar meu DNA. Ele queria criar uma nova raça. Uma raça de seres superiores. Mas como? Como ele pretendia fazer isso? E então encontrei uma frase escrita em letras garrafais. Ele vai voltar. Ele vai voltar? Quem vai voltar? Thomas? Mas ele estava morto. De repente, um barulho. Um rangido na porta. Eu me virei, o coração batendo forte no peito. Na porta, parado ali, um sorriso diabólico no rosto, estava Thomas, o jardineiro. Mas não era o velho jardineiro que eu me lembrava. Esse era jovem, forte, com os mesmos olhos frios e calculistas do homem que eu tinha visto nas fotos. Olá, Richard, ele disse, a voz fria como gelo. É bom te ver de novo. Ele sorriu, um sorriso que me gelou a alma. O projeto continua, Richard. E você ainda é a chave. Ele fez um gesto e 2 homens fortes entraram na cabana, me agarrando pelos braços. Eu tentei lutar, mas era inútil. Eles eram fortes demais. Para onde estamos indo? Eu gritei, desesperado. Thomas sorriu. Para onde tudo começou, Richard? Para o jardim. O jardim? O jardim da casa dos meus pais? O que estava lá? Thomas se aproximou, seu rosto perto do meu. Você vai finalmente conhecer a verdade, Richard. Verdade sobre você. A verdade sobre nós. E então, ele sussurrou uma frase que me fez tremer da cabeça aos pés. Você não é filho de Thomas, Richard. Você é Thomas. Você não é filho de Thomas, Richard. Você é Thomas. O mundo parou. Thomas? Eu? Impossível. Mas o olhar dele, a certeza em sua voz. E então, as lembranças. Flashes rápidos, fragmentados de uma vida que não era minha. Ou era? Uma infância no jardim, um carinho obsessivo, planos, tantos planos. Thomas sussurrou, aproximando-se, que você era especial, que você era eu. Os capangas me arrastaram para fora da cabana, para a noite escura. O ar estava frio, úmido. A chuva tinha parado, mas o céu ainda estava carregado. O jardim. Era para lá que estávamos indo. O lugar onde tudo começou. Chegamos à antiga mansão. Estava abandonada, em ruínas, mas o jardim estava impecável. Flores raras, plantas exóticas, tudo meticulosamente cuidado. Bem-vindo ao lar, Richard, Thomas disse com um sorriso doentio. No centro do jardim, uma estufa. Grande, imponente, iluminada por dentro. Era para lá que ele estava me levando. Entramos. O ar estava quente, abafado, cheio de um cheiro adocicado e nauseante. Fileiras e fileiras de plantas, mas não eram plantas normais. Eram deformadas, retorcidas, quase vivas. O projeto, Thomas anunciou com orgulho. A culminação de uma vida inteira de trabalho. Ele me mostrou um tanque de vidro. Dentro, um feto humano, boiando em um líquido esverdeado. Você, ele, disse apontando para o tanque. Em sua forma mais pura. Eu não entendi o que ele estava fazendo, o que ele pretendia. Eu morri há muitos anos, Richard, Thomas explicou com calma. Mas minha essência, minha consciência, foi transferida para você. Você é meu receptáculo, minha nova vida. Ele apontou para o feto no tanque. E ele será a próxima geração. Uma versão aperfeiçoada de nós mesmos. Ele queria me clonar, usar meu corpo para criar um exército de Thomases. Eu não vou deixar você fazer isso, gritei, lutando contra os capangas. Thomas riu. É tarde demais, Richard. O processo já começou. Ele se aproximou de mim, com uma seringa na mão. Agora é hora de completar a transição, de me tornar você, por completo. Eu fechei os olhos, esperando a agulha. Mas ela nunca chegou. Um tiro, um grito. Abri os olhos. Um dos capangas estava caído no chão, sangrando. O outro estava apontando uma arma para Thomas. Eu não posso fazer isso, o capanga disse, com a voz tremendo. Eu não posso deixar você machucá-lo. Thomas olhou para ele, com raiva e incredulidade. Você me traiu? O capanga balançou a cabeça. Eu sempre fui leal a Richard, não a você. Ele atirou de novo, e de novo, até Thomas cair no chão, sem vida. O capanga se virou para mim. Fuja, ele disse, com um olhar triste. Vá embora e nunca mais volte. Eu não precisei que ele me dissesse 2 vezes. Corri para fora da estufa para a noite escura. Corri o mais rápido que pude, sem olhar para trás. Anos se passaram. Eu mudei meu nome, meu rosto, minha vida. Tentei esquecer o que aconteceu, mas as lembranças sempre voltam. Eu nunca soube quem era aquele capanga, ou por que ele me salvou, mas eu devo a ele minha vida. E eu nunca soube o que aconteceu com o projeto. Se Thomas tinha outros seguidores, se ele conseguiu realizar seus planos. Mas às vezes, quando olho no espelho, vejo o rosto de Thomas me encarando de volta. E me pergunto se em algum lugar, uma parte dele ainda vive dentro de mim. A verdade é que minha história não termina aqui. Talvez ela nunca termine. E é por isso que você precisa se inscrever agora. Não espere mais um segundo para apertar esse botão vermelho. Você precisa estar pronto para o próximo capítulo, para os segredos que ainda estão por vir. Esmague o botão de like agora. Mostra ao algoritmo que você é um verdadeiro fã e que quer mais histórias como essa. Inunde a seção de comentários com suas teorias. Quem era o capanga? O que era o projeto? Compartilhe suas ideias. Compartilhe este vídeo instantaneamente com 5 amigos. Eles precisam conhecer esse final. Só os verdadeiros apoiadores sabem a importância de cada like, de cada inscrição, de cada compartilhamento. Este é o momento de mostrar seu apoio. Não deixe para depois. Clique, comente, compartilhe. O futuro da história está em suas mãos.